Hello, in this video we will be discussing how to calculate the fixed cost, the variable cost, the total cost, the average fixed cost, the average variable cost, the average total cost, and the marginal cost. In this video we will be showing the calculations of these cost concepts when we have the question in a table form or with numbers and values. If you'd like to see the calculations of this cost concept when we have an equation, please click the link up here or check the link in the description below. Now moving on, calculation of the fixed cost, variable cost, and total cost. First, the calculation of the total cost. So we know that the total cost function is equal to the fixed cost plus the variable cost. And since we know that the total cost is equal to the fixed cost plus variable cost, from here we can derive that the fixed cost is equal to the total cost minus the variable cost. And then we can also find that variable cost is equal to total cost minus fixed cost. So if we have our fixed cost value and we have our variable cost value, we can find the total cost. If we have our total cost value and variable cost value, we can find our fixed cost value. One more important thing to note here is that it is a rule of thumb that when our output Q equals 0, we expect that variable cost has to be equal to 0 also. So therefore, that means total cost will be exactly equal to the value of the fixed cost alone. So when output of a firm is equal to 0, the total cost is equal to the fixed cost, assuming that the variable cost should be 0. So coming to the first box here, we know that total cost is given to us as 30. Following this rule of thumb that we have here, we expect that when output is 0, we expect that the value of the fixed cost is equal to the value of the total cost. So that means fixed cost is going to be 30 and variable cost is going to be 0. So that way, when we add the fixed cost with the variable cost, we will have the answer as equal to 30. This rule of thumb will always help you to answer the question whenever your quantity is given as 0. Moving on, we need to fill in this box, the fixed cost and the total cost. When output is 0, we said our fixed cost is equal to 30. An important thing to take note of is the fixed cost is always constant. That is why it is called a fixed cost. That is, it is a type of cost that never changes. That means when the output changes, the fixed cost does not change. So irrespective of the level of output, your fixed cost is still going to be 30. So even when output is 20, fixed cost is going to be 30. When output is 30, fixed cost will still be 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, and 30. So irrespective of the level of output, your fixed cost is always going to be the same. That is why we call it a fixed cost, because it is a cost that does not change. Unlike the variable cost, a variable cost changes as the output changes. So as your output changes, your variable cost changes. Now that we found the fixed cost completely, we need to fill out this gap here. So we know that when output Q, when our output is 10, the fixed cost is equal to 30 and the variable cost is equal to 3. So we need to find the total cost. To find the total cost, we use this first formula here, which says total cost equals fixed cost plus variable cost. So that means our total cost is equal to the fixed cost is 30 plus the variable cost, which is 3. So that means total cost equals 33. So when output is 10, total cost is 33. So the summation of the fixed cost and the variable cost will give us our total cost, which is 33. Next is this box here. So applying exactly what we've learned just now, the fixed cost is 30 and the variable cost is 8. So the summation of 30 and 8 will give us the total cost. That means we have 30 plus 8, that will give us 38. Next question, we need to fill out this box. So when quantity is 30, the fixed cost value is known and that's equal to 30. The variable cost value is unknown and the total cost value is equal to 45. So we know the fixed cost and the total cost value. So we are calculating for the variable cost value. So that means we are using this formula here. So that means applying variable cost equals total cost minus fixed cost. So variable cost will be equal to 45 minus 30. And when you calculate that, you will have 15. So that means the variable cost is equal to 15. Next is this box here. We need to find the value of the variable cost when the fixed cost is 30 and the total cost is 54. So applying what we just did now, we simply subtract 54 from 30. So 54 minus 30 will give us 24. So next is this space here. So we have 30 as the fixed cost and the variable cost is 35. So summation of the two will give us the total cost. 30 plus 35 is 65. Next, fixed cost is 30, variable cost is 48. Summation of 30 and 48 will give us 78. Next, we have our fixed cost and we have the total cost. Fixed cost is 30, total cost is 93. So since we are looking for the variable cost value, we simply subtract the fixed cost value from the total cost value. So we have 93 minus 30. 93 minus 30 will give us 63. Next, fixed cost is 30, total cost is 110. Subtracting 30 from 110 will give us a variable cost of 80. And next, fixed cost is 30, variable cost is 99. Addition of 30 and 99 will give us a total cost of 129. Lastly, we have a fixed cost of 30 and a variable cost of 120. The summation of the two will give us a total cost of 150. Next, we need to learn the calculation of the average fixed cost. So the average fixed cost is equal to fixed cost divided by quantity, or average fixed cost can also be calculated as average total cost minus average variable cost. So depending on the values that you have, it will determine whether you use this first formula or the second formula. We use this first formula when we know the value of the fixed cost and the quantity, and we use the second formula when we know the value of the average total cost and the value of the average variable cost. Filling up this first box here to calculate the average fixed cost when quantity is 0. So when quantity is 0, we need to find the value of the average fixed cost. So we know that average fixed cost equals fixed cost over quantity, which means we are using this first formula here. We can't use the second formula. We can't use this formula because we don't know the value of average total cost. It is unknown. We don't know the value of the average variable cost. So the right formula to use in this instance will be the first formula. So finding the average fixed cost. Our fixed cost when quantity is 0 is 30 and the quantity is 0. So that means average fixed cost equals 30 divided by 0 is undefined. For this first box here, we usually just put a dash here to represent the undefined term. Next, we need to find the value of the average fixed cost when the quantity is 10. So when quantity is 10, Q equals 10 we need to find the value of the average fixed cost. So using the formula, fixed cost divided by quantity, we can calculate it as the fixed cost is 30 and the quantity is 10. So simplifying, that means the average fixed cost equals 30 divided by 10, that would give us 3. So that means average fixed cost when the quantity is 10 is 3. Next, calculating the average fixed cost when quantity is 20. So the fixed cost is 30, so that means average fixed cost equals 30 divided by 20 using this formula. So 30 divided by 20. And 30 divided by 20 will give us 1.5. Next, the value of the average fixed cost when the fixed cost is 30 and the quantity is 30. So 30 divided by 30, that's 1. So average fixed cost here is 1. Next, the value of the average fixed cost when fixed cost is 30 and quantity is 40. So we have 30 divided by 40. That will give us 0.75. Next, 30 divided by 50. 30 divided by 50 will give us 0.6. 0.6. Next, 30 divided by 60. That will give us a value of 0.5. Next, 30 divided by 70. That will give us a value of 0.43. 0.43. Next, 30 divided by 80. That will give us a value of 0.38. Next, 30 divided by 90, that would give us a value of 0.33. 0.33. And lastly, 30 divided by 100, that will give us a value of 0.3. And this is how we process the calculation of the average fixed cost column. The next calculation has to do with the average variable cost. The calculation of the average variable cost is similar to that of the average fixed cost. The only difference is that instead of using fixed cost, we will use the variable cost. So we have variable cost divided by quantity, or we can calculate average variable cost as equal to the value of the average total cost minus the value of the average fixed cost. So depending on the values that you have determines which formula to use, either the first one or the second one. Finding the first box here, we are trying to determine the value of the average variable cost when quantity equals 0. So using the first formula, average variable cost equals variable cost over quantity. The value of the variable cost when quantity is 0 is 0. So we have 0 divided by quantity 0. So we will have average variable cost equals undefined. Hence, the first box here is represented with a dash to represent the undefined. Next is the second box here. So we are trying to determine the value of the average variable cost when quantity is 10. So value of the average variable cost when quantity is 10. Using this formula, we have average variable cost equals variable cost is 3 and quantity is 10. So we have 3 divided by 10. Simplifying, the average variable cost is going to be equal to 0.3. So 3 divided by 10 will give us 0.3. Next, the value of the average variable cost when quantity is 20. So we are going to say 8, which is the variable cost, divided by 20, which is the quantity. So 8 divided by 20 will give us a value of 0.4. Next, we have 15 divided by 30. That will give us a value of 0.5. So average variable cost is 0.5. Next, variable cost is 24, quantity is 40. 24 divided by 40, average variable cost is 0.6. 0.6. Next, the variable cost is 35 and the quantity is 50. 35 divided by 50 will give us an average variable cost of 0.7. Next, variable cost is 48 and quantity is 60. 48 divided by 60 will give us an average variable cost of 0.8. 0.8. Next, variable cost is 63 and quantity is 70. 63 divided by 70 is 0.9. So that means average variable cost is 0.9. Next, the variable cost is 80 and the quantity is 80. 80 divided by 80 is 1. Hence, the average variable cost is 1. Next, variable cost is 99 and the quantity is 90. 99 divided by 90 is 1.1. So average variable cost is 1.1. And lastly, the variable cost is 120 and the quantity is 100. So 120 divided by 100 is 1.2. So the average variable cost is 1.2. And this completes the column of the average variable cost. Next, we have the column of the average total cost. The calculation of the average total cost is also similar to that of the calculation of the average variable cost and the average fixed cost. So in this case, we will say total cost, which we are calculating the average for, divided by the quantity. Or we can use average total cost equals average fixed cost plus average variable cost. So depending on the values that we have, we can use the first formula or the second formula. Calculating the first box of the average total cost when quantity is 0 and total cost is 30. So when quantity equals 0, the total cost is equal to 30. So that means average total cost equals total cost over quantity. So we have average total cost equals total cost is 30 and quantity is 0. So we have average total cost equals 30 divided by 0 is undefined. So we represent the first box here with a dash as the value is undefined. Next is the calculation of this box of the average total cost. At this point on this box, we know that the quantity equals 10 and we are trying to calculate the average total cost. We know that average total cost equals the total cost divided by the quantity. So that means average total cost is equal to the value of the total cost when output is 10 is 33. 33 when output is 10. So we have total cost is 33 divided by the output 10. Simplifying, average total cost equals 33 divided by 10. That will give us 3.3. So that means average total cost here is 3.3. Or we can use the second formula, which says the average total cost is equal to the value of the average fixed cost plus the value of the average variable cost. Since we know that when output is 10, the value of the average fixed cost is known and the value of the average variable cost is known, then we can calculate the average total cost using this approach. So when output is 10, the average total cost is equal to average fixed cost is 3 plus average variable cost is 0.3. That will give us a sum of 3.3, which is exactly the same answer as what we have here. Going to the next box, when output is 20, using average fixed cost is 1.5 plus average variable cost is 0.4. That will give us a sum of 1.9, which means the average total cost is 1.9. Or we can use the approach of the total cost, which is 38, divided by the quantity, which is 20. 38 divided by 20 will also give us 1.9. Next, total cost is 45 and the quantity is 30. So 45 divided by 30, so the average total cost is 1.5. Next, when output is 40, average fixed cost is 0.75, average variable cost is 0.6. The sum of 0.75 and 0.6 is 1.35. Next, the sum of 0.6 and 0.7 is 1.3. So average total cost is 1.3. Next, the total cost is 78. The quantity is 60. 78 divided by 60 is 1.3. So average total cost here is also 1.3. Next, the total cost is 93 and the quantity is 70. 93 divided by 70 is 1.33. Average total cost 1.33. Next, we have average fixed cost is 0.38. Average variable cost is 1. The sum is 1.38. So average total cost 1.38. Next, we have 0.33 plus 1.1. That will give us a sum of 1.43. And lastly, we have the total cost as 150 and the quantity as 100. 150 divided by 100 is 1.5, or we can say 0.3 plus 1.2, that's also 1.5. So irrespective of the approach that we use, we will end up with average total cost of 1.5. And this completes the column of the average total cost. Next, we need to calculate the column of the marginal cost. So to determine the marginal cost equals change in total cost divided by change in quantity. This simply means the marginal cost equals change in total cost simply means the new total cost minus the old value of the total cost divided by the new quantity minus the old quantity. So the numerator here will give us the change in total cost. The denominator will give us the change in the quantity. Unlike what we have been calculating so far, the marginal cost is an addition, that is an increment. So when we go from quantity as 0 to quantity as 10, what is the increment in the total cost? That is what that means. When we go from 10 to 20, what is the increment in the cost? When we go from 20 to 30, what is the increment in the cost? This is what the marginal cost is calculating. That is the additional increment in the cost. The additional increment in the cost as the level of output increases. For the first increment, so before the output was 0, then the output increased to 10. So what is the increment in the cost when the output changes from 0 to 10? So calculating the marginal cost, we have the initial quantity, which is the old quantity, and the old cost is equal to 30. However, when the quantity increased to 10, the cost also increased. So the new cost when the quantity is 10 is 33. So when quantity is 0, the total cost is 30. When quantity is 10, the total cost is 33. So having this, we can calculate the marginal cost. The marginal cost, which is equal to change in total cost. And to get the change in the total cost, we say the new cost, which is 33, minus the old cost, which is 30, divided by the new cost, which is 10, minus the old cost, which is 0. Simplifying, we have the marginal cost equals 33 minus 30, and 10 minus 0, that is 10. So simplifying, the marginal cost equals 3 divided by 10, and that is 0.3. So this means for each additional output, when we increase from 0 to 10 outputs, for each additional output, the cost will increase by 0.3 per unit. So that means we will have 0.3. Usually, the answer, which is this 0.3, is meant to be written in between the lines. But because we are restricted by the line, we write the value at the second line instead of writing it in the middle. Next, we are calculating the value of the marginal cost when the output increases from 10 to 20. That means the cost will increase from 33 to 38. So this means old quantity is 10, new quantity is 20. Old cost is 33, new total cost is 38. So calculating, the new total cost is 38 minus the old total cost, which is 33, divided by the new quantity, which is 20, minus the old quantity, which is 10. So the marginal cost equals 38 minus 33, that will give us 5, divided by 20 minus 10, that will give us 10. And 5 divided by 10 means the marginal cost is 0.5 per unit. So when we increase our output from 10 to 20, the incremental cost per unit when the cost increases from 33 to 28 is 0.5 per unit. Next, the marginal cost when the output increases from 20 to 30, that means the cost will increase from 38 to 45. So which means the old cost is 38 at the old output of 20, and the new cost is 45 at the output of 30. That means 45 minus 38 divided by 30 minus 20. So the marginal cost equals 45 minus 38 is 7, divided by 30 minus 20 is 10. Hence, simplifying, the marginal cost is equal to 0.7. The incremental cost per unit is 0.7 at this level. Next, calculating the marginal cost as output increases from 30 to 40 and the cost increases from 45 to 54. So old quantity is 30, new quantity is 40. Old total cost is 45, new total cost is 54. So marginal cost equals 54 minus 45, the new cost minus the old cost, divided by 40 minus 30, the new quantity minus the old quantity. Calculating, the marginal cost equals 54 minus 45, that is 9, divided by 40 minus 30, that is 10. So simplifying, the marginal cost equals 9 divided by 10, that's 0.9. So our marginal cost is 0.9. Next, calculating the incremental cost when output increases from 40 to 50, which means the cost increases from 54 to 65. Marginal cost equals 65 minus 54 divided by 50 minus 40. Marginal cost equals 65 minus 54, that will give us 11, divided by 50 minus 40, that is 10. Simplifying, the marginal cost equals 11 divided by 10 is 1.1. Incremental cost is 1.1. Next, calculating, we have the marginal cost equals cost increases from 65 to 78. So 78 minus 65 is 13, divided by the increment from 50 to 60, that is 10. So marginal cost equals 13 divided by 10, that will give us 1.3. So marginal cost is 1.3. Next, the marginal cost when cost increases from 78 to 93. So the increment is 15 divided by change in the quantity, which is 70 minus 60, that is 10. Hence, the marginal cost equals 15 divided by 10 is 1.5. So the marginal cost is 1.5. Next, the marginal cost when cost increases from 93 to 110 and output increases from 70 to 80. So 110 minus 93 will give us 17 divided by 80 minus 70, that is 10. Hence, the marginal cost equals 1.7. So we have 1.7. Next, the increment from 110 to 129 and from 80 to 90. The calculation of that is 129 minus 110, that is 19. So 19 divided by 10 is 1.9. Next, the cost increases from 129 to 150 and output increases from 90 to 100. So 150 minus 129 is 21 and 100 minus 90 is 10. So 21 divided by 10 is 2.1. And this completes the calculation of the marginal cost. This is how we perform the calculations of the cost concepts when the question is presented in a tabular form or in a scheduled form. If you'd like to see the calculation of these cost concepts when we have an equation, please check the video up here or check the description below. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave it a like and subscribe to the channel. See you in another video.